A warm welcome to all our guests here. This is a Sephardic Bikur Cholim program, and we are trying to best prepare for the high holidays with COVID-19. And we've had many baking programs on how you can make the best food for Rosh Hashanah. But as much as you like to eat the food, why not understand why we're eating these foods? What's the significance of putting them on the table? What's the significance of looking at them? What is behind all of this? And we're going to hopefully find out as we learn from one of the elders of our community who has much of the knowledge of our community from his father and from his papu, Professor, unofficial professor and unofficial rabbi, Mr. Al Maiman. B'chavod.
I'm just basically very unofficial. Yes, thank you so much, Rabbi. And the fly on the wall. I'm so delighted to be here to be able to share the experience with you. I wanted to show this. Can you see my chart, my screen? Hello?
Yes, we can.
Okay, good. So I thought it would be interesting to show this page here, which is my papu's machzor for Rosh Hashanah. And it is showing the page of the Yehi Ratzones. So you can see it's been well used, and it's continuing to go through our family. And it's a fairly simple and straightforward presentation of what the Yehi Ratzones are. And what I'd like to do this evening is talk a little bit about what the background of it is and how it helps us all together benefiting from and being prepared for Rosh Hashanah. 1 second, please. So the idea is that the first unusual thing about it is that it happens at home. All of our tefillot and are most always all in the synagogue. And some things are done at home, especially meals are done at home. But certain services are, of course, we know about the seder on Pesach. But there's also a seder for Rosh Hashanah. This is a ceremony at home. And the audience for that ceremony and the people who are involved are family and friends. And then also we know that we eat at a table, we have meals all of the time. And one of the things we have the tradition about the table for meals is that it is considered to be in some sense a mikdash me'at. It's a small sanctuary, and so what does that mean and how does that relate to us? Sometimes we forget that and we talk about all kinds of other things, we do all kinds of other things, but in terms of our mindset for eating and for mealtime together, it can and should, maybe more than we do today, invest it with an understanding and a feeling of sanctity. And we do that if we have meals with bread. We dunk the bread in salt, and that is reminiscent of the sacrifices that were made there. And if there's a holiday, then we have a kiddush. And incidentally, Rosh Hashanah next weekend is Friday night. The first night it's Rosh Hashanah, so you have a special kiddush plus Shabbat, and then Saturday night it's Motzei Shabbat, so you have Yak Nahaz, and it has a special kiddush then. And then of course we say Amotzi. Those two parts of our ceremony are invested with recognition of the holidays, just like all the other holidays are. We remember and mention the Yom Teruah and such, and we have the Amotzi, and we normally, what we do is we dip the bread in the salt, and then for now, we dip the bread either in the salt with honey, with sugar, or some mixture thereof. Point is that we're mindful at home of Rosh Hashanah being here. And then, of course, the next thing about our table in general are songs and service. Sometimes they're minimal. We don't do very much. Other times we sing zemirot and all of that. Sometimes it's elaborate, but always the experience of the table can and should be a special time for reflection and for connection with us spiritually as well as physically. So this Seder of Rosh Hashanah is one of the elaborate special evening meals that we have both nights of Rosh Hashanah, and they have special symbolic import, and they somehow set the tone to signal a good year for us. There are many sources that one could look at to find out what the different customs are and what the reasons are. One of my main go-to sources for this kind of question is the Keter Shem Tov, Rishon Tov Gagin, who was the chief rabbi, Sephardic rabbi of the British Empire for many years. He was born in Yerushalayim. His great-grandfather, I think, was at Rishon LeZion, and he was in a lot of different communities, and he looked at a lot of different customs, and he wrote his book Keter Shem Tov, recording and giving the reason for all the many different customs there are among Sfaradim and Ashkenazim as well, because he was in many different places and saw many different things. And so this source, the Keter Shem Tov, is what I use for most of what you'll see here. And he talks about this practice among the Sfaradim, and he goes on for probably like 3 or 4 pages, and he gives a very elaborate explanation and discussion of what the reason for it is and what we do and why we do it. He says the practice in the Gemara Keritut, in the Gemara of Keritut and Horayot, there's an episode, the rabbi's talking about the inauguration of a king, and it says the custom is that it happens at a well spring as a mayan, because that's a symbol of good things forthcoming always and continuing. So Abaye says, well, if we've determined that having that simanim are a good thing and something we should pay attention to, then on Rosh Hashanah, I have it written down here, one should eat kera, rubia, karati, silka, and temari. And on Rosh Hashanah, it's not presumably on Rosh Hashanah, it says on Rosh Hashanah. And there are different variants of the text, it turns out. And some say you should have them there. Some texts say to eat them. And there was a dispute about what that was meant. And some people, and there's some texts that say to hold them. And so there was a dispute about them that during the time of the Rishonim was apparently resolved by saying, we don't eat them, we bring them to the table, we look at them and hold them, and then that allows us to articulate the intended symbolism. And the symbolism rely on either the food item itself, or it could rely on the name of the food. And so that is sort of the core of the ceremony that was done. It was mentioned first in the Gemara for those particular items of food, and we'll talk more about them in a minute. And the question was, should you eat them? Should you look at them? Should you hold them? But use them on the night of Rosh Hashanah because it's Simana Tova. Then you also can find in Nehemiah, and I'm not sure the context of that, I didn't have a chance to check it out in detail, but there's a reference to sweet symbolic foods being an appropriate thing to do around Rosh Hashanah. And as the years have progressed, that was time from the Gemara, and then through the Geonim and the Rishonim, and they did what they did. And then there's also a Kabbalistic influence that has overlaid on this, and there's a Kabbalistic notion of symbolism that is embedded in some of these food items. If I go too fast or if something is unclear, please by all means stop me. I can't see your hand or rabbi or chat or just on the lookout, and I'm happy to stop and to talk about something you want to share, or if you have a question, please by all means let's keep this open and connected as much as possible.
So
And then,
far, so good. And I'm
okay,
monitoring the chat, and I'll let you know.
thank you so much, Rabbi. And so besides the good symbolism, the symbolism of staying with sweetness and with plenty and protection, there are some food items that are judged to be having negative symbolism and are not used. And one very interesting example of that is fish. And the fish is we know is part of our ceremony today. But some people say don't use a fish because dag is the way you say fish in Hebrew, and it sounds too much like dag. It sounds too much like worry and trouble. So the the symbolism based on the item or on the name is something that is there and back and forth, and many different communities have had and have many different customs about what should be the menu and the right way to proceed and go through this seder at home. And we see that one of the key words here, key terms, is simanat tava. And simanat tava, a good sign. One might ask that question. And my son, about 10, 15 years ago, when he was looking to do this at home and go into a level of detail with his family that he hadn't done yet, I sent him some of the materials that I had read, and he looked into this notion, the term of simanat tava. And he found 3 different possible explanations and understandings of what simanat tava could mean. One is the most, one explanation is there's no intrinsic value into the item, looking at it or seeing it or saying its name. It's rather that what seeing this item does in this context, it inspires us to do teshuvah. So the first explanation of simanat tava means that it's a trigger. We see that and we say, oh, this is Rosh Hashanah, and this reminds me of something that I got to do. The main thing it reminds me to do is do teshuvah, and that's one view of what the symbolism is that we're engaging in around the table that night. Another explanation is Michael Mesrich, I can't remember exactly the sources, pardon me, but the assertion there is when talking about creation of the world, it says, "Ba'eser ma'amarot nivra ha'olam," that God created the world with 10 sayings. And there is a discussion, observation that there's really 9. There are all kinds of explanations of why they're not, what the 10th one is. But this particular explanation says the alphabet themselves, the speech itself, was one of the creators God had to create, and God did create to finish the creation of the world. And so speech, which we're used to say tefillah and to communicate, is a creation. And so the simanat tava, it's siman, it's symbolic, it's not words for communication, it's figures, it's ideas, and not ideas, objects that we use to communicate. So these objects themselves, fulfilling a primordial verbal communication aspect of prayer that we use. So the Rosh Hashanah, because it's going back to the basics, the simanat tava, we are using the most primitive, primordial form of prayer, of communication, which is wordless, and it's a siman. So the object itself is a form of prayer, and having it there and presenting it, that's a form of prayer. The third explanation is the Ramban says that God, decrees from God could be subject to change, for unfortunately worse, but for better or for worse, and it's humanly possible to take action that somehow results in a decree being not fulfilled, either because we do something good. It could be something better, something negative gets taken away, or it's to set aside something bad that was going to happen to us. And so his explanation of the simana tava, what we're doing at the table with, and this is really, I think, not just looking at it or holding it, but I think eating it. He says that action which we take with these particular food items and think about them in this particular way of good things happening to us is sort of the clincher that a good decree that could come to us possibly during the year. We want to use that ceremony of Ratzones at our house with these items to take the action that will turn that potential blessing into a positive blessing, and it just gives us a heads up, an early start on what we can do and how we can have the year come out to be our best advantage. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about when we say Simanat Tava, the Ratzones are all based on this notion of Simanat Tava, and I thought it was really useful to look at what that term means, and we have these three different views and explanation. And if anybody has anything to add on that, any comment about what Simanat Tava means to you, something different or whatever, that would be a neat thing to hear about and talk about now. And silent. I don't know if anybody's is communicating another way besides words, but I will take the silence as saying there's nothing anyone has to say right now, and so we can go on. And so today, as continuing a practice that's hundreds and hundreds of years old in Levantine Ladino-speaking Sfaradim, we have honed in on the following ceremony at the table, both nights. For each food item, we ask Hashem to benefit us, and but it's included in a prayer that we say, Yehi Ratzon may be, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, for some good thing to happen. And we take the symbolism either through association of those words with other words that sound like it biblically, that mean good things for us or keeping away bad things from us, and it's based on the name of the item and some relevant verse in Tanakh. Some of them don't have a relevant verse, and we can talk about them later. But this verse then triggers the symbolism of the item or the name, and sometimes it's the rimon where there's seeds. There's no symbolism of the word for pomegranate, for rimon in Hebrew, but a rimon itself, you open it up and it has all those, whatever they call them, Oreos, or those little seed things, and that's many of them. And so there's many of them, and that's what that Yehi Ratzon is about. So that's about the item itself. And then we say the Yehi Ratzon and the pasuk, if there is one, in Hebrew, and we say it in Ladino, and sometimes in some families we say in English, and depending on the patience level around the table, you can either say all three for each one, or you can negotiate a Hebrew, a Ladino one, an English one, and some conversation. And then in our custom, we wait for everything to be done to eat, and it usually, I said it before, there's all different kinds of combinations of the hamotzi before or after, and the food after each Ratzon, or there you can go and do a lot of different ways of doing it, and you can follow the practice that you're used to. There's legs for just about any practice that you have. So, and then there is some variation, even among the Levantine Ladino speaking communities, there is some variation, but the main core of the food items, the menu that comes to the table, and this are these items in this order. It's manzana, dulce de manzana, it's apples, karati, prasa, pazi, spinach or beets, datiles, tamar, dates, calabasa, kera, pumpkin or squash, and then pescado, which is fish, like we see we have it here, or there is a custom of some to have fijones, black-eyed peas. They are called in Hebrew rubia, And Rabbi Keter Shem Tov talks here on a linguistic sidebar. You know me, I love sidebars, but I'm not going to take too much time on it here now. But what he says is the connection between Arabic and Hebrew is so strong that sometimes we learn things in Hebrew that we forgot, but you know it in Arabic and you can learn them. And so the name of Rubia and Arabic is the Rubia. That's what's a substitute for some people for fish, and we'll see the Ratzones that's done there. And then on the first night, it's the head of the fish or a ram, or not. So some people will have something else but will use, but that's that. And then on the second night of Rosh Hashanah, to address the issue of, well, they have pomegranate, and then there's another one, and for some people it's the pomegranate that serves as the shechianu, because this is a sidebar that I will mention, that every month of the year is either one day Rosh Chodesh or 2 days Rosh Chodesh, as we know. One day Rosh Chodesh is the first day of the next month. 2 days of Rosh Chodesh, it's the last day of the previous month, 30-day month, and it's the first day of the next month. Now, Rosh Hashanah is like neither of those. The first day of Rosh Hashanah is day 1 of Tishri. The second day of Rosh Hashanah is day 2 of Tishri. And the rabbis say that that's called Yama Arichta. It's a long day. And so while for holidays and for Rosh Chodesh, we have accepted practice of saying a shechianu in Kiddush, for example, on the second night, with exception, we can talk about that later, but the question has risen because it's Yama Arichta. Should we be saying a shechianu on the second night or on the Kiddush or not? And so there's a practice of having part of the Ratzones be something that is shechianu, so that when you're saying the Kiddush, you have that in mind. And that also has a lot of different combinations and permutations about how you navigate that and how it goes. So that the ceremony is say a Ratzon with a textual verse, if you have it, for each one of these food items. And then the idea of wordplay and word association is carried forward in a lot of different ways. Some people use a carrot, and that's roa gezar dinenu. That's against a gezerah. Well, that's a problem. But the way you say carrot in Yiddish is meren, and meren means carrot. It also means more. So it's a symbol of plenty, of looking for things. Lung is re'ah, and it's re'eh, to see us having a good year. Garlic is tumi, and some people will use that as a substitute for tamar. And the word association, actually, you'll see, fits tumi better than it does fit tamar. And then some additional foods that people will have: white figs or grapes, symbolizing kapara. That's what we're all about. During the Yimei Teshuvah. And parenthetically, some people say a red apple is no good, or dark grapes are no good, because there's this negative connotation for them as well. So there's all of that. And I wanted to share with you, I'm sure that in your collections you have many offerings of what some people have sent out, and this is one of them. The Simanat Tava, just did not expect it. It's something in a different order, and it's not exactly the same. But this does have rubia there, and instead of the fish, and then here this is another order, and of what you do and how you do it. The for sure the Hasidim have taken on this custom in a way, in a very positive way. I'm not sure about the Litvaks, or about the Mitnagdim, if they have adopted this or not, because the simanim are maybe stretching a little bit more than what their worldview is, what they would feel comfortable with. And then I also wanted to, and Rabbi Hadar, he sees on, and I thank him so much for sending this. I remember about 10, I know for a number of years, Rabbi Hadar was working on coming up with a package for the Ratzones, and about 10 years ago, he came out with this four-page pamphlet that has the cover and the front page where he's covered a lot of the materials that I have mentioned, and then he gives detailed instructions to follow, to pick what to do about Kiddush altogether, or with a beracha, without a beracha, and all of that. And then he has the Ratzones, and it has a Hebrew and a Ladino and English, so that everybody has the chance to pick and choose how much you want to do. And then in this way, and you'll see that the congregations, the cities that he gathered together to work with are mentioned on the bottom of the right. It's Atlanta, Cape Town, Cedarhurst, Detroit, Indianapolis, Johannesburg, Los Angeles, Miami, New York, Portland, and Washington, D.C. to do this print. And I know that he had been, I know because I was, and others were as well, including Chazan Ezos, in touch with him to give some shape to this and have it match. I think this matches very, very closely what Rabbi Sarot has, in fact, on theirs. So, Rabbi, do you have something to say maybe about how this is? I know, am I correct in how this was developed and what's happened in the last 10 years with this? And if
you've done well. There is a question here.
Yes.
And it's from Isaac Varon, Isaac Leon Varon. If the Yehi Ratzones had done after Kiddush and MOC, are brachot recited? And if so, should dates be eaten first?
That's a rabbi's question.
I know, but you're the running the show.
So my personal practice, I have to tell you that after I learned the Hochot Berachot and meals, my personal practice is to have a piece of bread all the time. And so I consciously, when I say after I say Amotzi, I will have, and what our practice is not to eat and say and eat, say and eat, say and eat. Our practice is to get it all said, and then we eat. And I have bread with me when I eat that. And so I think it's correct to say that the umbrella of the Hamotzi with the bread, when you're eating all of these items, obviates the need for a beracha.
Totally right. Now, if you want to confuse it and make it more complicated, you can do it the Moroccan way, and that is to do this before Amotzi. If you do it before Amotzi, then you've got it's like futikas, and you have to get the right order and everything else. So you're right. If you want to avoid all she'elot, all questions, you do like Al said. You do it after Amotzi, and then you have a choice. You can say all the Yehi Ratzones from top to bottom and then eat the food, or you can do them one by one, because there's no berachot to be made since it's covered by Amotzi. Absolutely. And I see that our good friend Eli Gabay has his hand up. So Eli, b'chavod.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. Good to see all of you. Shana Tova, it should be to all of you. I remember growing up at Reverend Ben Aroya and his wife, Zichronam Livracha, at their home. So that's how I learned, that part of Ladino and all the ma'achalim, all the foods. And so I give credit to them. But my question to you is, you mentioned garlic. Did you not?
Yes, I did.
And you said, so in what context? And by the way, the Moroccans do it not so complicated. We do it before, but we got an order of brachot, and we do it before the hamotzi. So I know that obviously it brings in different brachot that have to be said with each one, but the order is after so many years you do it, and it becomes a routine. But I can certainly see the advantage of having hamotzi, and that's the end of
So you were asking
I
about,
wouldn't say it's necessarily an advantage, Eli, because by doing it the Moroccan style, you get more berachot.
Yeah, that's true.
But
Yeah.
on the other hand, it's easier. I would say it's easier. It rules out making a mess with the berachot.
The way I
think
saw
it's, yeah.
it was a division between what is the meal and what is the special seder. You know, so this is a seder. Once you do amotzi, everybody goes for everything.
so like I said, in my experience reading the Hilchot Berachot, it's not, Rabbi, I would say it's easier, but to me it's almost safer. Because in the moment, something is
You don't
there.
miss it.
I'm not sure my shikul da'at is going to be exactly the right thing to do in the right moment. So that's part of my motivation for the way I do it.
But I was interested in the garlic.
Garlic, yeah. And I have the source, but I don't remember, but I have the source right now. I will look it up and I will.
So now, I never saw garlic. I mean, maybe I just don't remember using it already anymore. Garlic in the seder.
Yeah, this is not a general practice. This was some opinion,
Okay.
and I should have checked my source before I said it.
I liked what you said, that it was called tum, right?
Yes. Yes.
And modern Hebrew uses the word shum,
Ah,
or,
yeah. Yes.
but Arabic uses tum. And so that goes with what you said about Arabic, the word Arabic. So maybe, so in Aramaic,
No.
so the other Semitic languages use the tum.
Yeah. He
opposed to shum.
He quotes this books that talks about the similarity between the Semitic languages, and he mentions specifically Hebrew and Aramaic and Arabic. And
So it's not important. It's not important anymore.
Okay.
I just wanted to point out that when you said tum,
Yeah.
and you used it, it was fascinating for me because I'm familiar with the Arabic word of it.
Yes.
And it spoke home. But I've never seen it used in a seder of Rosh Hashanah, garlic.
Okay. I will take an action item. I'll find it. I can't find it right now.
No, don't worry about it.
Okay. So thank you. And so then wrong one. Okay, so I think I've mentioned pretty much. Oh, then, yeah, we'll get there. So, okay, so this is what I put now. So I mentioned that that Rabbi Hadar and my son actually was doing it also around 10 years ago. My first version of this, you can see, was 20 years ago. when I started looking into this, and well, he says, by the way, also the Ashkenazim, they have dipped their honey and they do their thing, that sort of limited type of service. But he observed that the Sfaradim in London and Amsterdam don't have this practice, but what they do is like what the Ashkenazim do. And then at the end of his writing on this, he says he wondered what it was. Why is it that the Sfaradim of London and Amsterdam don't do this? If it was Kabbalistic, and we know that their inclination, both historically and also philosophically, doesn't rest on the Zohar and Kabbalistic items, then that would be okay. But this custom, as we know, has its roots back at least in the Talmud, and there's the Shonim that were doing this. Why do they not do it? And he asked a lot of the old timers that were in the synagogues, and they told him seems to them they remember that they used to have it, but it just sort of dwindled. That custom got dwindled and didn't have it anymore. And so that's sort of a a wake-up call to us in everything that we're doing now. And Baruch Hashem, with all of the Zoom sessions and the digitized processes and practices that we have to do, there's an opportunity here. We've lost a lot, but there's an opportunity for us to hold the line and maybe even be Chadesh Yameinu Kedem and discover some of the practices that we had to do. So Rabbi Hassan, I don't know if you remember, if you had much contact with the Spanish and Portuguese congregations in Manchester or wherever, was there ever any kind of a hint that this is what they did on the table of Rosh Hashanah?
Not that I saw. In the Spanish and Portuguese that we went to, they didn't do it, but the Moroccan and Gibraltarians did, and they kind of pushed it in. So even those who were doing it, yes, they weren't taking it on from the pure Spanish and Portuguese rite.
So it's so interesting you mentioned that, because at the end of his write-up on this, it says, the Spanish and Portuguese roots are I'm not saying Morocco, but for sure the Gibraltar, they were the same. And so it is still been held as a custom in Gibraltar, but they got lost in the British Isles somehow. So yeah, that's a very interesting historical observation. Okay, and then we talk about the apple and coming first and dulce de manzana. And my wife, she talked the last week, and she's going to talk this coming week about making the fix-in for the Ratzones, and she talked about the dulce de manzana, and that is one symbol that is rooted in Kabbalistic thinking, because the apple is considered to be Shekhinah in some way and represent din. And the honey and the sugar is to represent tempering that judgment with sweetness, and so that's why it is that we would have that dulce de manzana. And he also makes another interesting point, and it's not unrelated to the Esadat Tovara. It was, some people say it was an apple, some people say it was an etrog. And that I'm not sure if where it started first, but the idea of using the etrog is so rooted in this thinking that the people will use an etrog. Now they started using an etrog instead of the apple, but the apple, I think, has prevailed. I'm not sure anybody today will use an etrog, but that was definitely there. And then we talk about the wait a minute. Excuse me, I'm sort of lost. Yeah, okay. It's here. And so what I want to do, that was my father, a recording of my father. Cuando comen manzana en dulce dirán. And so now you can follow. I think it may be big enough for you to follow. We'll listen to him a little bit.
Sea voluntad delante de ti, amona nuestro Dios y Dios de nuestros padres, que se renove sobre nosotros, añada tu buena y dulce, desde el principio del año y hasta cabo del año. Cuando comen brasa dirán, mira, tome de paneja, Amona Eloheinu Velohe Avotenu Shikaretu Oyevecha Vetonecha Om Nevasheratenu Karom Yadecha Altarecha Oloyevecha Ikaretu.
Okay, one more, and then we
Ve
go
avere
to.
delante de ti. Amona muchos yo tengo nuestros padres, que estás con tus enemigos y tus aborrecientes. Todos buscan de nuestro mal. Enaltece tu mano sobre tus angustiadores. Todos tus enemigos serán tallados.
Okay, so
Cuando comen así dirán,
how can
mira
it's gonna stop moving?
maneja Amona y
All right,
Elohim, Abote.
I'm sorry. Okay, so you got a little flavor of what we do and how he did it. And I wanted to point out a couple of interesting things. He says, how do we say Shana Tova in Ladino?
Añada buena y dulce.
Dañada bueno y dulce. And then one other way of saying it is Buenos Años. So what's the difference between año and añada? And that's and even here it says que se renove sobre nosotros añada buena y dulce de principio del año hasta el cabo del año, that you will renew us a good year from the beginning of the year until the end of the year. In English, it's the same thing. A year is a year. And as near as I can tell, the ada, añada, and it's also the same kind of thing for semanada. It's like making a noun, making an entity that called the year, where año is 365 days. It's a very subtle difference, and I don't know that it fits in every context. But when we say this, we're asking for añada buena y dulce. We want the year to be good, and we say the principio del año, the beginning, the first days, until al cabo del año. Day by day, it should be a good year for us coming up that way. So I thought that was something, a very interesting thing. I never paid attention to what we would say, how we talk about the year, but that's a really interesting observation to me. And you notice that in the first Yehi Ratzon, there is no textual source, and that's because I think that the symbolism here is the lemateket adin, right? That notion is strong enough all by itself. It doesn't have a pasuk, doesn't need a pasuk, but it's the concept of sweetening judgment. And then karati is something interesting. It is got a pasuk, right? We say, Tarum yadecha al tzarecha v'chol oyevecha yikaretu. And karati is related to karet, and so cutting them off. That's the word association of the name of the food item that is driving this Yehi Ratzon. Then we have pazi, salka, and if you look at this, it also is got not just one pasuk; it has two pasukim. It says, "Suru mimeni kopo ale'aven kishama amonai kol bichi." Suru tsuru tsuu misham. Tame al tigau tsuu mitocha hibaru nosei kale Hashem. So look at that. There's two source texts. One is in Tehillim, and the other is in Yeshayahu. Now, one thing I want to point out about Yeshayahu as a source text, we're nearing the end of the 7 haftarot of Nechama from Shabbat Av until Rosh Hashanah. The source for all of those haftarot are Yeshayahu, and it's fundamentally every one of them has different aspects of comfort and God watching out for us and taking care of us, et cetera, et cetera. It happens that source text that text is a source for something that we say every week? Does anybody want to share what I'm talking about? What you see here in not this particular one, but in the Haftarot, the set of Haftarot, are one of the main foundations and source texts that Shlomo Alkabetz used for the Hadudi. Ori, uri, uri, kumi, bat orech, all kinds of pesukim. We just finished the first pasuk in the week before. This set of the 7 haftarot of nechama and comfort are many references that Shlomo Alkabetz uses to that in Lecha Dodi. And Lecha Dodi, we know what that's about in terms of celebrating the connection between the Jews and God through Shabbat and Torah. And so here also we're using that source of Yeshayahu as a source text. It's fresh in our minds and it makes a sense to fit it in there. Okay. Then the next one is Datiles, and you'll see Yitamu, and at the end of the first line, I don't know if you can read it. Yitamu chataim min haaretz u'sheim odenam barachi nafshi et Hashem u'chastecha tatzmit oivai ve'avadta kol tzorei nafshi ki ani avdecha. And this also has got 2 texts, source texts. They're in Tehillim, and the word association there is tamar, is how we call a date. It's Yitamu chataim min haaretz. And there's what Eli was saying, that the word association fits much better with garlic than it does with dates. But we use the dates, and that's what the tradition is. Most people will do that. Now, it's another very interesting structure of each of the Ratzones that we ask God that his enemies and attackers will be destroyed. And we want to go along for the ride. so it's so interesting that God, we ask, what you should do is here it says it very, very clearly. Please, God, have your enemies and your abhorrence, and all those who seek out our evil shall be utterly consumed. God, take care of your enemies. And by the way, they're the same people, or if they're not, please save us as well. So this connection, this association between God's enemy and the enemy of the Jewish people is another theme in the Ratzones that we're playing on, and that's what's happening in the Shiva de Nechamata. We're getting up out of the depths of Tisha B'Av and standing up with our heads up high as God's Hashem, and we have chutzpah to say, to save us, give us kapara, because im kivanim im ka'avadim. We are connected with you, God, in a very important way, and you've told us that what's good for you is good for us, and what's good for us is good for you. So we make that one of the themes that we're mentioning in all of the Ratzones as well. And then the next one is Kira. Rabbi, how much time do I have? At 9 o'clock, we want to stop?
That's the plan, yeah.
Okay, that's fine. I'll do that. So then the next one is Kira, and it's very interesting to me. It says here, Shetikra roa gezar dinenu veyikareu lefanecha zachiyotenu. That it's a word play within the verse itself. It says you should tear up our evil decree. That's kera with an ayin, which is, and then you should be that our merits shall be read before you, yikareu, with an aleph. And so we are playing. We're playing with the sounds, even with the names of this, without using a source text for it. And then comes the fish, and some people, as we said, have black-eyed peas. Now there it turns out, I think among different places, I'm not sure Moroccans, but but Syrians maybe, and I think Syrians and others, they will use the rubia instead of dar as a matter of their long-standing practice. But on Rhodes, their Turkish Ladino-speaking custom, their custom was to use fish. But if you know today, you go to family Rhodes Lead, they will use rubia. What's that about? And so my dad told this to Joel Ben Alil a number of years ago, and I found an article written about Uncle Ike Myman, who was partnered with my dad in the 24th Avenue Market, who repeated exactly the same story. When it came time for Rosh Hashanah, the customers were, some of the people all of a sudden customers were saying, Benzion, Zach, where's the rubia? He said, what are you talking about? He said, well, we need black-eyed peas. What do you need the black-eyed peas for? We need fresh black-eyed peas. He says, what for? He says, we use them in the Yehi Ratzones. He says, why do you use them in the Yehi Ratzones? We don't use that. He says, well, we do. And so they had to order specially fresh black-eyed peas and come, and it came for Rosh Hashanah. And that was in the mid-30s when he found out about that. And from then on, they had the rubia in stock for the Rhodes Least, they have for the Yehi Ratzones. Now, what was the reason for that? It's not because that they had that custom differently than we did in the mainland of Turkey. It's because the story that my dad told Joel, that there was one year, sometime in the 19th century, not sure for exactly when it was, that the fish merchants noticed that the Jews are all looking for fish in this time of year. And so they raised, the price was getting down originally because they didn't have it, they didn't know what was going on. But then someone said, oh, we know they need it. We got them over a barrel. This is demand that we can take advantage of. And so they raised the price. They didn't just double it, they tripled, quadrupled it. And the people were beside themselves. They didn't know, rabbis, we can't afford this. We don't know what to do. And so they said, all right, this year and from now on Rhodes, you're not allowed to use fish in the Yehi Ratzones, substitute it with fijones, rubia. And the basis for the rubia is because it comes from the rubia, right? And that's a legitimate thing that is used elsewhere. So here's a case where the custom of our forefathers are in our hand was set aside because of economic gouging that some unscrupulous merchants did. And the rabbi said, well, we have an alternative here, and we will set the social norm not to use the fish, period, on this time, but use rubia. So that's what they do. Then comes the rubia, and so what we say is because we're using fish. But if you don't, and some people even for fish they just and not add kadagim shebayam or whatever. So that's that. And then the head of keves or of a fish, and I don't know how many people on the line will use some, and we know in the community some people actually do use a head of a lamb, and many people, they used to go out fishing for a smelt, and they would find a lot of small fish, and they would use the head of the fish, or go to the fish market and ask for a head and bring it home, and they have it. And then that Yehi Ratzon sheniyeh lerosh velo lezanav, that we should be at the head and not in the tail. And then it says v'tizkor lanu elo shel Yitzchak Avinu, and please remember, it's for our benefit, the ram of Isaac, that Akedat Yitzchak, the shofar, that theme of the Akedah and the ram and the horn is prevalent all throughout Rosh Hashanah. And so that also shows up here in the Yehi Ratzones when you're using the Rosh Keves. And when I was growing up, I remember always saying this, we never ever used the head of a lamb. We always use piscado. And it's a very interesting, strictly speaking, literally speaking, you would want to be using it only when you have the head of a keves. But the idea of the symbolism, I think applies here as well. It's a head, and it basically it's not a head of an idol or of a lamb, but we want to invoke the privilege of Akedat Yitzchak and Avraham Zehucha that he got for following what Hashem commanded him to do. So we do that, and then there is the Limonim, and I don't know what I did with that, but that's say Buzachuyotenu also that people will say for that too. Okay, so that, I'm sorry, it's, oh, I couldn't find it. We didn't put it there either. Okay, but it's there. In the books, in the synagogues, Machzorim, you'll find them there. So that concludes the review of, now that you got it, and now you got all the food, what are you going to do with it? It's symbolic, and it's at the table, which is Mikdash Me'at, and a place for us to come together with family and friends, and do everything we can to remember and come up with the connection and reinforce the connection between God and the Jewish people to our benefit. And each of these food items is reminiscent of some part of our history, is reminiscent of God attacking his enemies, who are our enemies as well, and saving us. And let us look forward to Añada Buena, Dulce y Alegre, Buenos Años. And I thank you so much for your listening. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Al. Wonderful presentation. At least we would just to say Tizkulu Shanim Rabot. And please join us for our other programs. On Sunday, we have the National Silichot program with the Sephardic Jewish Brotherhood of America. And after that, Jeannie Myman is going to be doing more Yehi Ratzones. And then we have some more programs coming up. So please join us. And Añada Buena y Dulce por todos.